Hello and welcome to Credit Versio's Q&A Wednesday live for February 23rd. I'm your host, David Michalek, and every week at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, we all come together live on Facebook and YouTube to talk about credit. As a consumer credit expert with nearly a decade of experience, I've conducted over 10,000 one-on-one credit coaching sessions, and I'm very much looking forward to helping you understand and improve your credit. Joining us today is America's #1 credit expert. He has 30 years of experience in the credit industry, including years working for both FICO and Equifax. In fact, he's one of the very few credit experts that actually comes from inside the credit industry. So let's welcome John Ulzheimer. I'm going to play his video first, then we're going to get right to it. Here we go.
John Ulzheimer is America's most recognized credit expert. With 30 years of experience in the credit industry, having worked for both FICO and Equifax, he's the go-to authority for answers to credit questions. Here to answer your credit questions, Credit Versio presents John Ulzheimer.
John, welcome.
Thank you for having me as usual. How's it going?
It's going very well. It's funny. I was doing a couple things here at my desk, and I looked up right as the scene with you and me talking was in your intro video. And for a second, it took me like just a second to figure out that, oh my gosh, are we live already? So it's been one of those weeks already. But thanks again for being here. We got a lot of questions on our video from last week. And, we normally start off our coaching sessions, our Q&A live sessions with talking about a couple of the questions, as many as we can handle in the short time we have together, the fastest 50 minutes that we have all week long. And I plucked out a couple of questions, and this is one that it's not so much a question, it's just more of an observation that came up many times during me answering questions during the week, and that is the difference between I would say cash versus credit. And I had this conversation with a couple of people. One of them is an executive for probably one of the biggest fintech companies that's out there that does kind of D paper lending, like the buy now pay later type of industry. And so we talked a lot about that conversion that people go through when they're like, hey, I got to pay cash. I've been paying cash for years. I'm afraid of credit. So I thought we would talk a little bit about the difference between paying cash, paying credit, why credit is, almost always hands down going to be a better option for people who just either don't have credit or might be a little afraid of credit.
Yeah, I've never understood why people are afraid of credit. I guess to some extent it's a product of either A, they screwed up really badly with credit one time, and so they are now scared of it the second time around, or someone has done a really good job of vilifying credit so much to them that they have they've drank the Kool-Aid, and they just now believe that just because Dave Ramsey says it or Susie Orman says it or whomever says it, that credit.
I was wondering if we were going to speak the name.
Yeah, that somehow this wicked look, and opinions vary. I mean, I guess anybody can have any opinion they want on those types of things. I have a very different opinion, which is if you can manage it like an adult and you don't let it take over your life, and you know what it is, it's almost like alcohol, I guess. It's very enjoyable to a point, but if it gets excessive, then it kind of controls your life and can ruin your life and can lead to really bad stuff. And so I think to some extent it's like that. Look, you'll never ever, unless you win the lottery, you'll never ever be able to avoid credit, right? Unless you choose to live in an apartment your entire life, or you choose to not ever drive a car. And take Uber and Lyft everywhere, or taxis. And or if you choose to be silly and write checks and pay cash for everything, which no one wants these days, and when everyone freaked out about COVID, they don't want you handing them stuff. Yeah. So I guess for me, it's just yet another year of trying to explain how the system works and let adults make adult decisions and determine on their own if they want to choose to use credit, which is entirely voluntary, by the way. No one ever forces anybody to get into credit.
Yeah.
And if they do choose to get into it, there are ways that they can use the system to their benefit, pay very little to no interest, and live a more fruitful life because they can buy stuff today that they otherwise would have had to save up for years, perhaps even decades, like
Yeah.
really expensive houses to buy. So I like the idea of using it to your benefit and understanding the potential downside, and just for me, it's there really is no viable alternative.
Yeah. Well, one thing I was looking at the other night was I have I would say a relatively new credit card, that Costco Citibank card that my girlfriend who works at Costco has been pushing me to get for some time now, because it has a lot of benefits. Whatever your warranty
Sure.
is on an electronic device, it doubles it. They've got all kinds of travel benefits. I think it's like 2% on gas, or 4%. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's really aggressive. I mean, it's very, very attractive. And one of the things I looked at, I was looking at my last few months of statements, and I've bought a handful of relatively large items on it. And I love the fact that it's got two sections. One is, what interest you've paid, and then below that, what your points are. And the cool thing was, my interest was zero. I've yet to pay Citibank a penny of interest in the months that I've had it. Yet they've given me, I think now I'm around 280, something like $280 of cash back, which they give you in the form of a check. So,
Right.
I mean, if there's like you're 100% right. If it's like, it can be like alcohol. It has, it's something that can get out of control if you don't have some discipline. And one of the lessons I've learned about credit, and a lesson that I've learned the hard way in my past, is that you've got to use credit cards the way that you use cash. In a way, it's just like you've said many times. It's portable capacity. It just allows you to pay for things that you'd pay for cash anyway. But look at all the other benefits that you get from it.
No, if you look at the four primary forms of credit: credit card, student loan, mortgage, and auto. So if you look at kind of like the typical perspective and attitudes about those four common forms of credit, credit cards are vilified roundly.
Yeah.
There is no consumer advocate that is all about credit cards, right? There is, the CFPB is all over the credit card issuers. They just generally get beat up by pretty much everybody. So credit cards are pretty roundly vilified. People are generally pretty positive about auto loans because of all the upside to having a car.
Right.
People are immensely positive about mortgages because of the wealth building properties of buying a home, right? And on the front end of student loan, people are extremely positive. On the back end of student loans, people are extremely negative.
Yeah.
Okay. So of the four forms of credit that I just named, where credit cards are probably the most vilified, the back end of student loans is probably, if not a close second, maybe a tie. And then mortgages and autos are generally, no one ever is super critical of auto loans or mortgages. Well, mortgages are, you're going to pay interest. There is no such thing as a mortgage-free interest-free mortgage, right? There is such a thing as a 0% auto loan, but that is a very narrow slice of the whole as it pertains to auto loans. Most auto loans, you're going to pay some form of interest, okay? Student loans, you are going to pay interest. And so there is no such thing as a interest-free student loan that I'm aware of anyways. Credit cards, interest is optional.
Yes.
It's optional because you don't have to carry a balance. And so the most vilified of the four forms is really the only one where interest is always optional, right? Where the other ones, interest is almost never optional, except for one at the very, very narrow interest-free auto loan for a car, and that has to be through the captive auto lender and for a certain make and model. It's not like
Right.
something that's always available for all makes and models as long as you qualify for it.
Yeah.
Most cars you can't get 0%. You're going to get something, right? 4%, 6%, 9%, whatever. Mortgages, 3%, 3.5% right now. And so I just find it almost hypocritical that we trash credit cards, yet they're the only form where interest is entirely optional.
Well, not only that, but depending on what kind of credit, even some of your mid-range credit cards, you've got some kind of reward that's going to come with it if you're disciplined. Not every card, but if you start getting like your first like Chase Visa, what's that one called right now? The Sapphire or something like that. I think a pretty low barrier of entry, but they still have a little bit of a reward incentive with those. So there's something. If you can use them, you can be smart about it. There's a lot of upside to credit cards, and also John, like you and I had kind of look at it the same way. Like I have no idea what my interest rate is on my Citi card. Couldn't tell you. Don't care.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Same thing with my Cap One card. Don't have a balance. Same thing with Discover card. Don't have a balance. Don't care. I'll go back and forth between them from time to time, just depending on like sometimes Discover can be really motivated and have 5% cash back on Box Warehouse. So maybe I'll use that one for Costco or for Petco or something like that. But there can be a lot of benefits to the cards. So Mike's got a pretty good comment. I wish there would have been someone like you, John, while I was going to school, because I was never taught anything about credit. Yeah, join the club. Yep.
Yeah, I do. Back when you were allowed to go into a classroom in person, back in more than 3 years ago. So I used to do a lot of speaking engagements at schools, and you're right, Mike. These kids don't know anything. It's actually pretty scary. I guest lecture at the University of Georgia every semester, and it's a senior level class. It's an elective, so not everyone's required to take it. And I don't know what the actual name of the class is, but I call it kind of practical personal finance. And so and it's really all guest lectures the entire semester. And so I come in and talk about credit, obviously. And there's people who come in and talk about how to pick mutual funds. There's people who talk about how to pick life insurance and the different insurance aspects. There's people who come in and talk about doing taxes. So it's practical. It's practical financial related activities that you're going to have really for the rest of your life. But that there is no class that teaches you how to do it. And, it's a little bit like driver's ed is, nobody in their right mind would toss their keys to a 15 or 16-year-old and tell them to go out and get milk. That would be stupid, right? But we will gladly toss our 18 and 21-year-olds out to go and get credit and just assume that they're going to figure out how to do it on their own. And in our world, getting it wrong is, as you know, 7 years, right? That's how long derogatory entries remain on credit reports. And so it's a pretty stiff penalty for getting it wrong. And so, you're right. Thankfully, at the parent level, hopefully there are many parents who teach their kids how to responsibly use credit, just like they teach them how to responsibly drive a car. But at the academic level, other than the onesies and twosies, it's not like a common component of academia.
Yeah, it definitely should be. Arian's back, and with the questions, can you explain if line item utilization is weighted more heavily than aggregate utilization?
So let me explain what that is so that folks who are watching understand what it is before I answer it. So utilization is a credit scoring. Utilization means in credit scoring, the relationship between balances and credit limits expressed as a percentage on credit cards. So if you have a credit card with a $10,000 limit and a $5,000 balance, that card is 50% utilized because $5,000 is 50% of $10,000. So credit scoring systems calculate utilization when they're calculating your score, and they do it in two ways: line item utilization and aggregate utilization. So aggregate utilization is the more important of the two metrics, but don't don't leave yet because there's more to the answer. Don't leave, Arian, after being on for 4 minutes. So aggregate utilization is calculated, and people can calculate it themselves just by pulling their credit reports and grabbing a calculator. What you would do is you would look at your credit report. And by the way, this is important. This is based on what's on your credit report, not what your actual balance is at any particular time, because your balance is usually only updated once a month. Yep. And it's probably not what your balance actually is right now at 6:16 Eastern time on Wednesday, right? So your balances are going to be either higher or lower depending on new charges, new credits, interest, fees, and payments. So that's how your balance is determined. So if you pull your credit report, you're going to have values with all your credit cards, and two of them are going to be credit limit and balances. So you add up all of the balances on your credit cards, and then you add up all the credit limits on all of your credit cards. And you can consider credit cards that don't have a balance but are still open. So all that stuff counts. And that's why you always hear people say, don't close credit cards because you could lower your credit score. And then you would take the aggregate or the sum of your balances and divide it by the aggregate or the sum of your limits, and that's going to yield something point whatever. You can multiply that by 100, and then that's the percentage. And you want that percentage to be as low as possible because that ratio is influential to your scores. Doing it as a line item would mean look at every single individual credit card and calculate the utilization of every single credit card. Mm-hmm. So that's where you kind of see people come up with these kind of hokey strategies. What if I spread my balances across a bunch of credit cards, and that means that I won't have any one card with the utilization greater than whatever? Is that really the, so they're come up with all these weird, wacky ways that they think they're going to fool the scoring system.
Right.
It doesn't really matter what you do with your balances. Your aggregate utilization is still the same, right? It doesn't matter if you have all of your balances on one card or your balances spread across 5 cards. Your aggregate balance is still the same. So your aggregate utilization is going to be the same, and you're not really going to fool the scoring system. Another thing to keep in mind for the you've got to spread them across credit cards crew is there's another metric that no one talks about, which is the number of accounts with balances. So in that category, the debt category, where utilization resides, also resides how many accounts with balances. And so that entire category of debt is not just utilization. There are other metrics. So when you start spreading credit card balances out across multiple cards to escape any one card having high utilization, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, because now you are spreading balances across multiple cards. And so the net of your actions are not going to be in your favor. So keep that in mind. Look, the proper way to deal with this is the proper way, which is pay down your credit card balances. And then that way you don't need to worry about line item utilization or aggregate utilization, because those ratios are all going to be very, 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 very low.
Excellent. Yeah. And to pop that back up there, Mike's like, guilty, tried that. And Nashville tax resolution says hello, Dale. Hey, Dale. In fact, Dale's got a question. Let's see here. I'm in the process of clearing up my credit. I'm assuming that means you're doing some repair. What should I say? Repairing my credit, and I'm trying to weigh the options of closing low limit credit cards or keeping them for history. So I think really it's just that last part of the question that he's really asking.
Yeah, and I guess, and I kind of accidentally answered that question a minute ago.
Yeah.
I guess, Dale, I'm going to do something that I hate, which is to answer a question with a question. But why would you want to close those lower limit cards? And so if you're in the process of trying to improve what your credit reports look like and improve your credit scores, closing low limit cards isn't going to help you. In fact, it can backfire and have the opposite effect. From that perspective, that's not really what I would call a score improvement strategy. Look, if you've got credit cards that you can't stand the card issuer, the customer service is terrible, whatever, the annual fee is ridiculous, and you just simply don't want the account anymore, then close it. But don't close it right before you apply for a mortgage, right? Do it when you're in the middle of what I call credit no man's land, which means you don't have any sort of new application on the horizon that you can screw up by closing a credit card. So do it in the middle of some period of time where you don't really care if your score goes up or goes down, because you're not really utilizing it for anything. But sure, look, I get it. Sometimes people just don't want the cards they have anymore, so close them. But just be realistic with your expectation that your scores aren't going to go up because of that. They could go down because of that, and you may actually want those cards in 6 months or a year for whatever reason. So I always tell people to tread cautiously when they include closing credit cards as part of their score improvement strategies.
Yeah. Jay's got a question. How likely is your credit affected negatively by being added as an authorized user, for example, a late payment, or removing yourself as a user? A little bit to unpack on that one, John.
Yeah, so that's a pretty common strategy for credit building and credit rebuilding. That's how I started building credit back in the dark ages. My dad added me to a to a Sears credit card, which was issued by Citibank. The authorized user strategy is also is the one I tell people whenever they ask me, how do I build credit for my kids? That's like the number one on my list because I still like it. It's a credit card with training wheels. But you have to be careful if you're added as the authorized user to if you're doing it for credit building, then make sure that the card issuer, as a matter of policy, adds authorized users to their credit reporting. And that's pretty easy to figure out if they do or don't. Number two, you should be aware that the charges of the account and the activity and the management of the account goes on your credit report, just like it goes on the primary card holder's credit report and any of the other authorized users' credit reports. So that can be things like large balances, utilization spikes, defaults, missed payments. So you're not protected from that stuff just because you're the authorized user. There's not some sort of a filter on the reporting that only allows the positive stuff. You get it all. And so you got to be careful who you associate yourself with when it comes to authorized users. You're not liable for the debt, but unless you want to hop on the card and hop off the card like a merry-go-round, you're going to want to make sure that you associate yourself with someone who's going to manage the card properly. And so therefore you're actually benefiting from it rather than, kind of looking over your shoulders and wondering if they're going to mismanage it at any particular time. But no, I love it. If you ever read any of the articles I've written about credit building, it's always on my list. Always on my list. Authorized user.
Yeah, Jay, in fact, if you want to read John's articles, you can go to creditversio.com. You don't need to log into your account. Just go to creditversio.com. There's credit coaching. And every single article and video that we've got on the website was written by John, created by John. So there's a lot of content there. Great question, Jay. Next one. Oh, this is a really good question from National Tax Resolution. Off topic. Actually, nothing's really off topic here. Just, as long as it's credit related, we'll answer it. But something I have to ask: when you dispute an account, is it excluded from consideration of accounts timely paid during the dispute process?
Yeah. So not really. I think I know where this comes from. When you file a dispute with the credit bureaus or with the furnishers directly, it's very likely that there's an obligation to mark the account as being in dispute, right? That's right out of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And the way that this is accomplished is by adding what's called a compliance condition code, CCC, compliance condition code to the account. There are a lot of compliance condition codes. The one compliance condition code that causes credit scoring systems to treat the accounts differently is the XB code. X like X-ray, B like boy. And when the XB code is associated with an account on a credit report, it reads consumer disputes reinvestigation and process per the Fair Credit Reporting Act or some reasonable derivative of that phrase. When that XB code is associated with an item, so first off, a lot of people say, oh, well, the score ignores it. That's wrong. Stop reading Facebook experts on that issue. The XB code prevents credit scoring systems from considering the account for the payment history and debt-related metrics, but that doesn't cause them to completely ignore the item. So for accounts that are being paid as agreed, then unfortunately, if you dispute it and that XB code is added, any balance associated with that account and any payment history associated with that account is ignored. But the fact that it exists, the age of that account, all that stuff is still being considered. And I can tell you why that happens. This actually was a decision that FICO made even back when I worked there. I mean, a long time ago. And so I'm going to kind of paraphrase the theory here, the hypothesis. The hypothesis is we don't want to get in the business of arbitrating between what is accurate and what is inaccurate on a credit report. That's not what a credit score is designed to do. Credit scoring systems don't care about credit file accuracy. That's something that the credit bureaus and the companies that furnish information to them, those are the ones who care about that, because that's part of their obligation, is to make sure all that stuff's accurate. But what you also don't want to do is you don't want to unfairly penalize someone's score because of something that is arguably incorrect. And so while something is in the active investigation process, the scoring systems, and this is VantageScore also, not just FICO, the scoring systems will ignore it for the different components that could actually harm a consumer score, payment history and debt. And then once the investigations are completed, that XB code is removed. And if the item remains on the credit report, that means it's been verified as accurate. And so it's fair game again and becomes part of the scoring process in full, like it was prior to it being investigated. And of course, if the item is deleted, then it's not affecting the score at all because it's gone. Or if it's corrected, then whatever impact it has on the score is the natural and intended impact, because now you have some accurate account or collection, and it should be considered by the score because it's an accurate component of a credit report.
Yeah, one of the reasons, if it's payment history and debt, the big reason why mortgage brokers or underwriters are not going to want to see anything in dispute when you're going through the qualification process, because that maybe it doesn't skew the score, but it'll surely skew the DTI.
So that ship has long since sailed, right? So once the credit repair, there's the credit repair companies, and there's what I call the credit repair vermin. Once the credit repair vermin heard about this, they were just disputing everything on the credit report that was negative. The score would artificially go up, and they would tell the consumer to go out and apply for something. And then 30 days later, the scores would tank again. And not only did FICO almost remove authorized users from credit reports because of like some surreptitious activities like that, but the reaction from the mortgage industry was pretty severe. And that reaction was, if anything on the credit report is marked as being in dispute, we're going to stop the process until you get done with your investigations. And then there was a time where the credit bureaus actually had to set up toll-free numbers, and consumers could call in and say, look, I withdraw my dispute. I can't get my mortgage loan. I withdraw my dispute. And so it almost like it backfired on them to some extent. And so, that ship has sailed, and anyone who thinks they're going to fool some lender by disputing everything negative, that strategy that's a 15-year-old strategy that everyone knows about.
Yeah. Exclude me from that group. But then again, I got into this space about 10 years ago. I'm like, well, I don't remember hearing anything about that. I mean, I've heard about it, but it's not something that was, nobody floated that idea when I got into this, about 10 years ago. So yeah, crazy things that people try. Okay, Jay's got a question. It's more about business credit. Jay, I'm not a business credit guy. John, I don't know if you know anything about business credit. That's way outside.
Not enough to waste anyone's time with it.
Yeah. So I appreciate the question, Jay. But
I'm a consumer credit guy. That keeps me busy enough.
Yeah. Okay. So another question from Nashville. What is an unrated account? Are unrated accounts considered untimely paid?
So I'm not sure what kind of credit report you're looking at, but in Metro 2, there is no such thing as unrated. So all accounts have to have some sort of a payment rating. The payment rating can indicate that it's current, or it can indicate that it's some level of delinquency. But no, the only accounts that are considered derogatory by scoring systems are the ones that are overtly coded as being non-performing accounts. So things that are 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, or are in some stage of default, like charge off or repo or foreclosure or third-party collections. And so again, unrated is not a code in Metro 2. All accounts have to have some sort of a payment rating associated with it, and it's either going to indicate that it's current or some level of being delinquent.
All right. Randy James, yeah, you ask a question. I'll put it up here as long as it's not something that's way outside of the topic.
Only if I can ask a medical question. He's a PhD, right? So I'm gonna.
Yeah, who knows what he's?
I guess that's MD. I guess that's MD.
That would be MD or DO or maybe like
he's like a Henry Kissinger doctor, not a Dr. Feelgood doctor.
Johnny S., thank you both for your time. What is the quickest way to raise my score? I'm paying off my credit cards this month. Scores are currently 590, and 619 across various bureaus. Old pay history, bad 3 years old. Okay.
Are you going to answer that one? Because it's kind of a repair.
Sounds like more of a building question.
Nah, that's a repair question.
You think that's a repair question? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Johnny, okay. Well, so I'll use one of John's quotes, which I think is great, and I use this one quite a bit. The more time you can put between yourself and anything that's negative, the better. But really, sometimes just aging this stuff off is really, or paying off debt that you have is the best route to go. There's not really much of a. Just one thing I've learned is that there's not really much of a quick fix. I mean, like John talked about a second ago, John did this with an authorized user. I was added on as an authorized user when I had to rebuild and recover from bad credit. So those are the things that you really want to look for. Really, Johnny, what I would recommend that you do is go into the coaching section inside. If you have your Credit Versio account, do it there. If you don't have Credit Versio, then go to our YouTube channel. You're asking the question from YouTube. Just go into the coaching videos, and it's really hard to triage what's going on with your credit without really knowing anything more than what the scores are. But if you go through the coaching videos, I think you're going to learn a lot about how credit works. Then I would just start, doing an appraisal of where you are and what you have with your credit, and then just build from there. Okay, let's see. Okay, Nashville is throwing my FICO. I'm not sure that's relevant to what we were talking about there. Okay, let's see. We got a bunch of questions that popped in. Let's grab one here. Jeff. Okay, so this is kind of a repair. So TransUnion sent me a letter, states they don't believe I sent the dispute letter. Jeff, that's actually not uncommon. What I would do is when you go into your next round, there's a drop-down menu called frivolous dispute. It just reminds them that, hey, I sent the letter. Look at the indicia or the postmark on my letter. It wasn't sent by somebody other than me. Really, really weird to hear that coming from TransUnion. Usually that's just more of an Experian thing. Okay, Nashville, unrated account. I paid on time in full, but did not reaffirm before bankruptcy discharge. Okay, so she's saying he or she is saying maybe that's something that's coming from your My FICO account. Yeah, I don't know either, Nashville, what that is. If you want to send a screenshot into support@creditverso.com, it'll get to me. We can take a look at it and see if I can figure out what it is. Hold on a second. Let's see. Scott Oliver. My identity was stolen and my credit got better. Larry the Cable Guy. Haven't seen Scott in a little while. Okay. Dale Evans. What I really don't understand now is I know I have late payment on my credit report, but yet I have no derogatory accounts. And if I apply for any credit, I'm denied because of the late payment.
Well,
interesting.
If you have a late payment on your credit report, then you do have derogatory accounts. Late payments are considered derogatory. So they're not two separate and unique things. And of course, those can cause your scores to be lower and a reason for denial. So it doesn't have to be a current late payment for it to be derogatory. It doesn't have to be a recent late payment. It's the fact that you have a late payment on an account or multiple late payments on multiple accounts. Those are all generally considered to be derogatory entries, even though they may be old or they may not have balances any longer.
Yeah, Dale, depending on where you're getting your credit report from, pretty much if you're getting a Smart Credit or Identity IQ or MyFICO, it's going to have a status somewhere. You'll have a 24-month history that'll tell you when that late payment was. If it's older than that, if it's maybe 36, 48 months ago, I mean, you're not going to see it in your 24-month history, but it should be somewhere in the notes saying that there was a 30-day late at some point.
So one thing, can we throw his question back up there? And I think I can guide him to another. Okay. So the last sentence or the last part of his question, and if I apply for any credit, I'm denied because of the late payment. All right. So when you're denied credit, the lender is required to send you what's called a notice of adverse action. Most people just refer to them as denial letters, but there's actually a formal name: adverse action notice or notice of adverse action. And that's a form notice that is a requirement in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So they have no choice. They have to send it to you. And that letter, for the last 11 years, is required to include information about your scores, the reason the score isn't higher. So there's really, it shouldn't be a mystery what your score was when you were denied, what credit bureau it came from, what brand of score it was, and then the 4 reasons why the score wasn't higher. So if you have any of those letters, then they're going to identify, it has to identify the credit bureau that provided the information. And so you should pull that credit report, which is your right to do. I mean, you can pull them from annualcreditreport.com for free every week through the end of the year. So that won't be hard to do. Mm-hmm. And you'll be able to see on the report what accounts include late payments. And so obviously those are the ones that were influential to the lender when they are making their decision. And that's the whole purpose of the notice of adverse action, is so it solves any mystery around, I don't know where this data came from, I have no idea what they're talking about, I have no idea what my score is, that it solves all those mysteries, and the notice of adverse action has been a part of, that's decades old, but the amendment to the FCRA, where the score component of it is required, has been around for over a decade. And so that's old hat. So Dale, you should be able to get some really good information about the denial from those letters, assuming you still have them, as far as what exactly did the lender look at and consider when they made their decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dale, also too, if you want some help finding that, just send an email to, actually, you can send it to me. It's just davidm@creditversio.com. As long as you've got a Credit Versio account, I can drop in there and look at your credit report, and I can tell you exactly where it is. It'll take me 2 seconds to find it. Brandon, you've got a question too, more of a credit repair question. What I would suggest that you do, I won't put it up here because we don't do credit repair questions when John's in with us, but you can do one of 2 things. Send an email to support@creditversio.com, or if you want to send it to me directly, davidm@creditversio.com, I'll answer it for you. Unfortunately, because it's YouTube, I can't see once we end the live, because of the software, I can't see the post. I can for Facebook, but I can't on YouTube. Okay. Yes, the late payment is 4 years old. That is a very bizarre. I don't know, John. 4-year-old late payment causing a denial if everything else after that's been. I mean, there's got to be some other things going on with that credit report if a 4-year-old late payment is.
And there's a lot of stuff we don't know, right? I mean,
exactly, yeah.
There's some lenders that don't have subprime products, so you can apply all day long and you're never going to get approved. And you have other lenders who have a lot of tolerance for that kind of stuff, and you could have stuff that's currently late and probably get approved. So really, I keep guiding you back to the notice of adverse action, because that's why it exists, is to solve this mystery of, And really what you're doing is you're asking, why does the lender have this policy? Why did they choose to deny me because of a late payment that's 4 years old? And respectfully, Dale, I mean, there are some lenders who don't want to do business with people who have late payments because they don't have subprime products. And there are other lenders who again have tolerance for stuff like that. And unfortunately, the terms are more punitive, and they subsidize, or they offset the risk by charging more for their products and services. So that's the nature of credit. There are 10,000 lenders in this country, right? And so there are a lot of options to choose from. If you keep banging your head against the wall with one of them, trust me, there are many, many more just around the corner. And eventually you probably will find one that may want to do business with you.
Yeah. Great answer. Okay. Let me see if I missed anybody in here. I don't think I did. I got some comments in Russian. I don't think we'll, I think that's Russian. Looks like Russian. We won't put those up. Okay. Coming down to the end of it. So if you have a last question before we wrap up here in a couple of minutes, please jump in there and put in your question. To be in touch. Of course, I have credit Versio. Okay, great. Yeah. Just email me, Dale, and I'll take a look at it. I can show you exactly where it is. So one of the nice things about if you've gotten your credit Versio account recently, it's probably going to be a smart credit account, which does have a 7-year history. So it's really easy to find where that late payment is. Okay. And the last subject, John, that we were going to talk about, or that I wanted to bring up is, I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday that he's going to teach a course for some financial planners. It's somebody that we're working with, and one of the points that he made is like, hey, I'm talking to financial planners, about 1,000 of them, and their clients largely, don't really have any credit problems. They don't have any money problems. But one of the things that's really common is the surprise that people who make a great income, that they automatically assume that they're going to have great credit, which is not a safe assumption. And also conversely, that people think, well, I don't make a lot of money, don't have a lot of income, therefore I'm probably not going to have good credit. So just a real quick story. Years and years ago, this is back, when real estate was blowing up. What is this, 2004, I think. I had a lot more money than sense, and I remember I was buying a car, and I thought, well, I own a couple of homes, make a great income. This should be a no-brainer. And so the F&I guy came back out. He's like, hey, listen, we can get you financed, but it's not going to be a great rate because your credit score is only I think he said it was a 650. Back then, auto money wasn't loose like it is now. I forgot what my interest rate was, but it wasn't all that great. I was just like beside myself. I didn't know anything about credit. I'm like, well, how's that possible? And what I didn't know at the time was that I was a heavy credit card user, but I didn't know that you were supposed to pay your cards off before the end of that statement date. So as far as as far as the way that I looked on paper, is I was like a 90, sometimes 100% utilization all the time, which was pretty catastrophic. So, John, maybe you could talk a little bit about how these things aren't mutually exclusive. Like high money doesn't mean great credit. Low money or lower income doesn't mean bad credit.
Yeah, I think so. You're right. That seems to be one of the knee-jerk reactions when people don't get the offers that they think that they should have gotten, is they kind of default to their income. Or they try to blame, I paid that, it must be wrong, or my ex-spouse screwed my credit. There's always an excuse. No one wants to be told that their credit isn't good, right? It seems like it's not a very pleasant conversation. So and actually the lenders would prefer that the experience with you be exactly like what you described, where you really didn't know how the system worked and you couldn't kind of manipulate how you managed credit for the 30 days prior to you applying. They would rather you be organic and see what your credit really looks like without you moving money around and doing this and doing that and taking a bunch of advice. So in some respects, you did exactly what they wanted you to do, which was nothing. You showed up. And you got the deal that they offered. when I got hired at Equifax back in, well, actually when I started there in November of 1991, we were in the process of purging income information from credit reports. There was a time
Wow.
when income was on credit reports, but it was horribly inaccurate. It was hard to verify, and even the consumer didn't even know what their income was. And so for the people watching, you're probably saying, that's nuts. I know exactly how much I make. Really? All right. So we're in mid-February. You can tell me within a couple of $1,000s either way how much you're going to make this year, and consider raises. Consider for you folks who are hourly employees, consider a drop in your hours, an increase in your hours, an increase in your hourly rate, bonuses, second jobs, whatever. There are a lot of stock options, bonuses, profit sharing, distributions. So if y'all can legitimately tell me within a few $1,000s one way or the other what you're going to make in 2022, I'd be extremely impressed. And so even the consumer has a hard time with what their income is. You may know what it is right now, but you probably don't know what it's going to be in 6 months. And so anyway, the data was horribly inaccurate, and we purged it. So number one, the reason your income is immaterial to your creditworthiness is because it's not even on your credit report. So that's the primary reason, is because it's not there. Number two, income is a capacity metric, meaning can you afford to take on this amount of debt? Meaning, do you have the ability to write a check every month or make a payment every month for this monthly payment? That's why DTI is considered, right? It's a capacity ratio. It's not a creditworthiness ratio. And your example is a very good one. If it was, it would suggest that professional athletes and high-paid lawyers and doctors and people who own businesses or people who inherited wealth from their family all have 850. And people who work at McDonald's and pick up shifts on Uber and Lyft, they all have scores of 500 because of the massive disparity in income. Well, we know that that's hogwash, right? You have people who work hourly jobs and make modest incomes who pay their bills religiously and have killer credit scores. Mm-hmm. And you have consumers who make tons of money but for some reason miss payments and default and have terrible credit scores. And so there's no real correlation. There's certainly a correlation with capacity, but there's really not a good correlation with income. So that's the issue with respect to income. Now, there are lenders. Pedal Card is a good example of one. If any of you have ever heard of Pedal Card, Pedal, which is PETAL, like the petal of a flower. So Pedal Card does cash flow underwriting. And for those of you who don't know what cash flow underwriting is, it's actually kind of all the rage these days for people who are new to the country, like immigrants, the immigrant population that didn't kind of bring a credit report with them from whatever country they came from, because we don't do that. We don't share credit reports across borders. And but they have bank accounts, and there's money that comes into their bank account. There's money that goes out of the bank account. Their average daily balances. So cash flow underwriting is what Pedal does, and it's becoming much more accepted by large mainstream lenders as a supplement, or as in lieu of a traditional credit report and credit score. It's not going to replace it. It's not as predictive, and you don't run around with these killer credit scores. You're not getting a $50,000 credit limit from Chase because you have good cash flow, but you may be able to get yourself a good classic level credit card, and then obviously be able to upgrade from there. But cash flow is a little bit different than income. Cash flow is just simply how you manage money coming in and out of your various accounts. It's not necessarily the amount you make. So there is some consideration being given to the flow of money, but it's really more of kind of how you're managing it in and out.
Yeah, Jay's got a comment like how Pedal does the opening and closing statements at the beginning and end of the month. Yeah, that's kind of nice. Makes things a little bit easier. Okay. Well, John, that was a great.
The only downside to that, and look, I'm not saying it's a downside. I'm just saying this is what people are. It's a generational thing. It's like are you comfortable giving certain types of information to a bank? And so my father would never in a million years apply for a card with pedal. I probably wouldn't, but my son would. And it's just a generational thing, and it's kind of like the comfort level you have with kind of disclosing information about your bank accounts. So your bank accounts are not on your credit report, right? Your checking and savings account and the balances and the money coming in and out, that's not on your credit report. So then the question is, well, where in the world are they getting this information? Well, they're getting it from these aggregator companies. So Yodlee, Plaid is another one. And what they do is you give them the login and password to your bank accounts, and they will actually log into those accounts as if they were you, and they will pull either through an API or what's called screen scraping, and they will get that information from your lender, and they will be able to see things like money coming in, money going out, average balances. But you have to be, I mean, can you imagine going and telling someone like David, I don't know if your parents are active credit users. Mine are not any longer. But if I ever went to my father and said, Dad, I'm going to need your password and I'm going to need your login information because I'm going to give it to some company you've never heard of. They're going to go into your account like they were you. They're going to get all your information. And he'd be like, are you freaking crazy? And you call yourself a credit expert? That's nuts. So I think it's a generational thing, right?
Yeah.
But that's kind of the trade-off with cash flow underwriting is you have to be comfortable and willing to give out some pretty sensitive information that banks implore you don't give this information out because you're giving someone access to all of your account information. So again, it's a cool thing, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah, it sounds very much like Experian Boost. I mean, you're essentially giving them the same information as well.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
except for them, you're giving it to a company called Finicity, and Finicity is logging in as if they were you, and they're pulling down information about like how you pay your utilities.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I'd be curious what the demographic looks on that on that too. Is that a younger crowd doing Experian Boost? I guess that would probably make more sense considering that's.
Well, look at the commercials. I mean, do you see people like me in the commercials, or do you see young people?
I see John Cena with that purple cow.
Yeah, I don't think I understand that. Maybe they try to appeal to the WWE crowd. I don't think I understand that marketing angle. But to me, it appears like their marketing is targeted towards younger people who are more comfortable and willing. A, they have a need for building their credit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And B, they were probably more comfortable with disclosing that type of information.
Right. Well, there we go, John. We went a little over. Thank you so much for joining me again.
No, actually. The last 3 minutes doesn't count.
That's right. All right. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. John, thank you so much for hanging in here and answering questions. And everybody, we will see you next week. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Take care. Thank you.